Hello my creative friends, it's time to take another art break, and today we're going to be painting this whimsical style face. I love creating whimsical style faces and these little characters because it's a great way to tell a story, and they are a lot simpler to paint than what you might think. Today I'm going to walk you through and just slowly go through the techniques of how you can paint this face. I'm going to walk you through it step by step, and for those who'd like to have a tracer, say to paint right along with me, but maybe drawing's not your thing, I do have a Sketchbook membership. That's where I have all of the tracers for any of the paintings I do on my channel, so you can simply go ahead and trace and then paint right along with me. Go ahead and click that QR code, not click, scan. I always want to say click. Go ahead and scan that QR code. It'll take you right over to my Ko-fi shop, and that's where you can join the Sketchbook membership. It's very reasonably priced. I so appreciate all those who have joined and support my channel that way. Thank you so much. Now, faces are a great way to tell stories, and I have named this little gal right here Miss Marigold Morning. And the beginning of the story is that Miss Marigold doesn't like to begin her day until her coffee is warm and her cat approves of her hat. Well, let's get started and paint right along with me. The paper I'm using is the Canson XL watercolor paper in 140 pounds. I'm also going to be taping out the edges using a little bit of the magic Scotch tape. I always put it on my clothes to get a little bit of the stickiness off before I put it on my paper. I'm using two different sets of watercolor today. It doesn't really matter what kind of watercolor you're going to use. We're just looking for some warm colors and some cool colors to paint this face. I'm using a Princeton brush, a number 6 round, and I'm also going to be using this tiny little mini detail brush as well. It's not important that you have that little detail brush. You could use a marker if you would like to add that small details. I'm going to go a little slower than what I normally do at the beginning, probably more like a real-time painting, to give you some ideas of how you can simply paint these faces. I know a lot of people are intimidated by painting faces, so I wanted just to break down the steps and show you how you can do this easily. When creating the faces, I want some warm colors and I want some cool colors. That smaller set has just a nice variety of some warm colors and some cool colors, so I'm going to be using a lot of those to paint my faces with. And I have them all swatched out. If you're a member of my Sketchbook membership, I always give you a little color chart for inspiration for the colors that I use for inspirations for your paintings. I'm first going to start out with this reddish brown. In the set, I believe it's called Apple. It's a really nice shade of kind of an orangish reddish brown color. I'm going to water it down fairly well, and I'm going to start with this color on the outside edges of my paper. Now, because this is a student grade, it's going to dry fairly quickly. The paper will. So I'm going to put my paint on each side, but then I'm going to rinse my brush out fairly quickly, and then I'm going to be kind of taking that area where I painted that darker color and dragging it towards the middle. I'm going to be going for a goal of like leaving more of a highlights center spot amongst my face. So now I have my paint on, I've rinsed it out, I'm tapping it on my paper towel, and then now I'm softening those edges and bringing that color out to the middle. But my goal is to try to have more of a highlight area through the center of my face. By doing that, you're going to have more dimension. It's going to make your painting or your face feel like it's going around. So my highlight is in the center, my darker colors are on the edges. While that area is still wet, I'm going to pick up a little bit more of that reddish color I just put on the outside of my face, and I'm going to be putting it on the tip of my brush, and I'm going to layer in a little bit of that color around my eye. The goal is that my paper is still wet. That color is going to just kind of blend out. It'll be darker around the edge of the eye and then gradually fade out because the paper is wet, so it's more of a wet on wet technique. So I'm looking for more of a softer shadow line. I'm not looking for harsh. If your line ends up being too harsh and more exact, take your brush, rinse it out with water, give it a squeeze, and kind of just lightly tickle those areas. You're looking for that gradual blend of colors. I'm also going to go in and tap the nose with just a little bit of color as well. That same color I put on the edges and around the eye, I'm going to do that as well on the center of my nose. Now don't worry if that color kind of goes a little bit out of your nose shape, that's fine. We're just looking for that soft kind of color. I'm going to tap a little bit on the chin. I'm also going to add some of that color underneath her neck. I'm looking to create a shadow on one side, so that's going to be my shadow side. I chose the left. I'm going going to be coming up to and putting that on her forehead up by the hairline. I'll be adding a little bit more color there too to create another layer of shadow. So I'm coming back in and just tapping the nose a little bit and that chin. I'm going to be using that same color just to tap ever such a tiny bit of it on her lips as well. Now this is where I'm going to be adding a next darker color. This set has a darker russety tone of color, and I'm going to switch down and use that micro brush to be able to paint these tiniest bits of line. I'm going to be using just that tiny small little brush to create just the ever so tiny little bit of a mouth line. Now if you feel more confident doing this with a marker like a micron pen at the end, you could do it easily with that, but I'm just kind of testing my skills and polishing my skills to be able to work my small mini brushes. It's always great to test yourself or practice more. And I'm doing just the slightest bit of line. So I've watered down my paint more, twist my brush so that paint is coming to a point on the end of that brush. And I'm just doing the smallest little line there. I'm also going to be using that for the eyebrows, just those little one line strokes there as well, and creating the lightest bit of line work. Again, you can always use your micron pen if you feel more confident doing it that way. This is where I'm going to be dropping in a little bit more of that first facial color that I had done on the outside of the faces. I'm going to just wet my brush, pick up just the tiniest bit, and I'm going to be tapping it on the lips. This is where it's really super helpful to have a nice round brush with a little bit of a point at the end. It's just really going to help with these small little illustrations to be able to have that nice point on the edge of your brush, on the end of your brush. I will have some links down inside of the description box for some of the things I'm using. So if you're interested in checking them out, there's links inside of there. The next little detail I'm going to be adding is I'm taking a little bit more of that russety darker color and I'm adding just the tiniest bit of nostril detail to the bottom of the nose. This little brush works perfect for that little detail, but you can always use a micron pen if you feel more confident adding that little tiniest detail that way. Now I'm going to switch back to my larger brush. My painting has had a little bit of time to dry and I'm going to be adding the next layer of shadows. I'm going to be starting with kind of a light color. It's called Banana Cream in my set, so it's a nice little golden shade of color. And I'm going to be tapping that underneath the hairline and off to the side of the face, not going much lower than underneath the eye. And I'm creating a shadow that way by putting the butter color or the banana color on first and then tapping over that just the tiniest bit of almost a golden yellow ochre color. So I'm creating a warm shadow first. I'm going to be putting that on the left side of my face, up towards that hairline area underneath there as well, and then around the other eye. Again, I'm still trying to keep that highlight area down the center of my face if I can. So I don't want that color to merge all the way to the middle. So I'm leaving just the slightest bit of highlight there. I'm just working that color back and forth. So I'm having the buttercream or the banana cream color first and then tapping in the yellow ochre and softening it a little bit with some water to create those shadows. I'm going to repeat that same process down below underneath her chin on the neck to add that next layer of shadowing as well. I almost forgot to do her hands, but you're going to want to do her hands very similar. I just used a little bit of that red color first that I had used for the shadow and added those banana colors on and the yellow ochre on top to add a little bit more flesh tone to the hands. Now the next step is to add some cool tones of shadows on the right hand side. I'm going to be using an unusual combination. I'm going to be using a key lime green and a blueberry color. I know it sounds really funny, but it's a real fun way to add some whimsical color to these faces. Now definitely you want to have it blended down, enough water to about tea consistency, no thicker than that, because if you go too dark too quick, she's going to end up like she has a black and blue eye. But if you do it very lightly, it's just a real fun way to add a shadow, cool shadows to these paintings. Now let's start working on her hair, and this gal's going to have a little darker hair, so I'm going to start out with that same color that I had used for her face shadows. I'm going to start with that color, that apple color, to go ahead and start the first color for her hair. Now all of my colors are mixed to about tea consistency, no darker than coffee, especially for those first layers, and I'm going to be brushing that color on her hair. Now I'm going all around the hair. You could leave some bright white areas if you would like. Remember, you're always painting the shadows, so these are the highlights. This is what you can think of as being your highlight color. The next layers you lay on top or more of your shadow colors. So this is going to be your brightest color. So it's okay to leave a little bit of white if you want to. When I painted my little gal, since I'm using a student grade paper and it does dry a lot faster than 100% cotton, I'm going to be working on one side of the hair first, and then I'll be working on the other side. If I try to do it all at once, my paper is going to dry a little bit too quick and I'm not going to be able to layer my colors on as well as I like. So I'm going to just use that natural part line there to be able to work on them both at the same time. Now to create the shadows for this area, I'm going to be picking up that blueberry color, that darker color that I had used for the cool shadows on her face. That's the color I'm going to be adding on top for her hair. So that russety red color is mixing with that blue, and it's creating a real pretty kind of cool darker shadow. So I'm adding that at the base of her hair, around closer to her face, and a little bit more underneath her hat line. That's where your natural shadows are going to be. And then when I got the left side done, I went ahead and did the same thing on the right hand side. If you're new to painting faces, you might want to do a double drawing of your face. So once you draw your face, if you're drawing it on your own, is to take a light box or hold it up to a window and trace another version of it. So give yourself some time to practice putting these colors on. If you're in my sketchbook membership, you can easily trace just the face and practice once or practice twice and get the hang of it or the feel of how to paint these little faces. These make great little trading cards, by the way, just the little faces and maybe just her hat up above would make a fun little trading card if you want to break the painting down into a smaller version. Go ahead and practice. It just takes a lot of practice and learning how your watercolor works and how much paint you need and how much water and how it works on your paper, especially if you're using a different paper than I am. Since my face is completely dry, I'm going to tap in just the tiniest bit of color for the eye, and I'm using this bright key lime green first, and I'm just tapping in right in the center of that eye area, leaving just a little bit of white on the outsides, and I'm tapping in that key lime green. I'll go back later and add a darker color for the darkest part of her eye, but I'm going to start with that bright green. At this stage, I'm going to be adding the final blush to her cheeks, and I'm going to be using the same apple color that I had used originally, and I'm going to put it on basically the same way. I'm going to add the color just to the outside area of where I want it on her cheeks, rinse my brush out, give it a tap so it has some clean water in it, and then just softly blend that color more towards the nose area or to the center of the face, and it creates the prettiest blush cheek look. And this is when I noticed I hadn't done her ears. You want to do the ears the same way you do the face. So basically put a little bit of that apple color on first, tap in a little bit of the golden colors to soften and add a little shadow on there. They're just a minor little detail, but you gotta paint them. And here I did, completely forgot to do them. But I can go back in at this stage and easily put on the ears. At this stage too, you can always take a look at your nose and your lips to see if you want to add even a little bit more color. I like to usually darken one side, so choose a side of the nose that you want to add a little bit darker, more of that apple color too, and just a tiniest bit of onto the lips as well if you'd like to add those little extra areas on there. And she's pretty much done. I'm going to work a little bit more on the eyes, add just a more tiny bit of color around her neck and on her chest, but those are all going to be just very subtle little washes. So hopefully you can kind of see how just by adding these simple little layering of shadows and building the colors as you go can make this really cute little whimsical face fairly easily. Now for the final bit of dark detail to the eye, I'm going to be mixing up a little bit of a darker brown color, and I'm going to be tapping it into the eye I'm hoping at this stage that I can get just a little bit of that green still peeking around the outside that I had first put on, but I'm not going to worry about having white highlights. I'm going to be adding those with some pens at the end, some ink pens. So basically I'm just getting my color on and I'm just tapping it ever so lightly. You don't want a ton of water when you do this little step because you kind of want it more centered. More at the top of the eye is where I was going to, so you can kind of see how that green is just right underneath there, but you have just a little bit of that dark in there as well. Now I'm going to give my face plenty of time to dry. I'm going to use my heat tool, dry it, and then I'm going to be starting on the background. For this part of the video, I'm going to speed it up and I'm going to overlay some music over the top, and you can just watch me build the colors as I go. For this video, I was more concentrating on the face, and if you want to see how I paint animals or flowers, I have lots of videos on my channel. You can just go ahead and click any of them, and I go a little slower for those parts, and you can learn how I paint animals and flowers on another video, but this one was more focused on the face.
Sunbeams crawling on the floor, bare feet touching the day before. Coffee steam dances, lazy and slow. Dreams still whisper where I go. Through the window glow, I see it clear. The turning world, it pulls me near. Moments quiet, hearts unfold, the simple story softly told. Books half open, pages bent, time well spent, but somehow spent. Shadows stretching, daylight fades, memories linger in golden shades. Through the window.
The painting is finally done. It has plenty of time to dry, so I'm going to start with the micron pen work. I'm going to be using the color sepia tone for the line work on my painting, and I'm using the nib size 005, a super small one. That's what I'm going to be using to create all the little hand sketched quality details on my drawing. I'm first going to start with the eyes. I'm going to be adding the extra darkness, tiny little lashes, adding just the little tiny bits of line work here and there. I'm not looking for a color book outline. I'm just adding just a little bit here and there. And this is where I'm going to be using the little pen to add just the tiniest bit of white to the eyes, a little highlight on the nose and on the bottom lip as well. And then I get to decide where do I want to add lines. So I'm going to be using this pen to go around here and there, but then I'm going to be adding some color pencil next. I love using color pencil with watercolors, especially on a little bit smoother paper. And this Canson watercolor is slightly smooth, so I love using the watercolors to add a little bit more texture and some interest. So I'm going to finish up the pen work and move right on into the color pencil. The Prismacolor pencils are one of my favorites to use in the Premier line. They have just a nice quality of lead and colors to choose from. I think I bought all of mine maybe at Target is where I think I bought mine at, but I'll have links down inside of the description. You can easily order these on Amazon as well. Now when doing the color pencils, I like to add some colors in that perhaps I didn't use with my watercolor. Just as a simple little surprise element is to add a little bit more texture using some colors that I didn't use in the painting. But I can just vary them up, add little texture lines in my actual painted areas. In the flowers, I add them, but I also add them in my background as well this time. I'm creating little dash marks and little doodles in the background. The more you do this, the more you kind of find out what you like for marks. I like X's, I like O's, and I like little dash marks, so I often will add those. Now on these purple flowers, I do bring out my white pencil to add some white lines for this. It's a nice subtle soft line, the color pencil is, and I really enjoy using it, especially on top of a dark color. So you just add as much texture, dash marks, a little extra texture marks if you would like to using color pencil, but you most certainly can leave it just a watercolor as well. Well, let's take the tape off and see what it looks like. Adding these few simple shadowing techniques on this face really does bring this character to life. Let's take a look at what she looks like in the studio. This set of Ghosty Pals is a workshop that I created. You can go ahead and scan this code. It'll take you right over to my Ko-fi shop, and then you can simply trace and paint this sweet little collection. And here's my Miss Marigold looking cute as can be. Hopefully you saw that adding just these simple little bit of shadows really can make these whimsical faces come to life. If you're new to my channel and you like doing whimsical art and crafts, come on over and see what I'm doing. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. Leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up. It really does help my channel grow. Well, thanks for joining me, and hopefully you'll come back and join me again. And perhaps next time you'll paint right along with me.